We're talking Houston Texans on the Our Lads Football Network, Our Lads Football YouTube channel. And that means it's time to introduce our special guest. He covers the Texans for the Texans Wire, Mr. Cole Thompson. How's it going, Cole?
Yeah, Greg, it's just the start of the offseason, which means my life is pure hell trying to figure out who is actually going to be able to be affordable for the Texans to sign so they can build up another 10-win season, hopefully make it past the divisional round, and maybe take down Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game. So, it's fun time.
That would be nice. And
it would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Look, the Chiefs are the Super Bowl loser. You know what happens to Super Bowl losers. So maybe they're overdue for some sort of injury catastrophe season. Sort of like the way the Texans last year. It's amazing going over all the injuries that the Texans had last year.
What's so funny is that I picked the Texans to go 10-7, and I can't technically boast that much about it because I had them going 10-7 with a fully healthy roster.
Yeah.
So what would they have been if Nico Collins doesn't get hurt in week 5? What would have happened if Stephon Diggs was out there past week 8? Like, there's so many different things. What I will say about Kansas City, not to get off topic so much, this is starting to turn into the Brady arc. Because remember, Brady didn't go to the Super Bowl for like a decade when he was in New England, but he would go to the playoffs every single year. Then they revamped the offense. They brought on new wide receivers. They brought on a few new offensive linemen. And then lo and behold, they went on that 3-year run where the dynasty was revamped. So maybe that's it now for Buffalo and Cincinnati and Baltimore and Houston to like get over that hump, because of Mahomes before he retires is going to go on another dynasty run. It's going to be with probably not Andy Reid, and it's probably not going to be without Travis Kelce, but he's not done. He may just be on pause for like the next 6 or 7 seasons.
We can all hope so. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to remind everybody not this particular guide, this was last year's, but the 2025 draft guide from Our Lads is going to be available April 7th, leaving the stores for your home. So again, this is the best guide on the market. You got all the scouting reports, hundreds of players, also team reports, and I'm responsible for several of them, including this one, the Houston Texans. That's why I appreciate Cole's time. He fills me in with everything going on with Houston so I can look smart writing up for Houston Texans news in the guide. Also, don't forget to check out the Our Lads Insider as well. You don't have to worry about ads if you purchase the Insider, so check that out at ourlads.com. Links in the description for everything, including how to contact or follow Cole. Actually, you can contact Cole. All you have to do is check out his X account, which we will have a link in the description for. Okay, so we've got about 40 minutes or so. So let's go ahead and start first with free agency, Cole. And looking at, there's quite a bit of key free agents that the Texans have to handle first before anything. Let's start on offense. And of course, the big story on offense is going to be, is it a foregone conclusion that Stephon Diggs is headed to Dallas, or is there any chance that Houston could bring him back?
It's so interesting because you look at the current status of what is the franchise tag. And so many people brought up, well, why don't just franchise tag him for another year? Well, the asking price is for $25 million, so almost $26 million. Stephon Diggs got that restructured contract when he came to Houston for a second-round pick. They reworked his deal from being a 3-year, $104 million contract to a $22 million one-year deal. They kind of had a good inclination that he was a one and done, like in Houston. They felt like that he was a dude that was going to help vitalize the offense. They're going all in with CJ Stroud on a rookie contract. That's why they paid to go get Danielle Hunter. It's why they paid to go get Joe Mixon. But the problem was that they thought they were going to have a more stable Tank Dell as the number 2. Well, Tank Dell's now out for most of, if not all, 2025 with a knee injury. He is not going to be back ready for training camp. They feel confident that he is ahead of schedule, but what exactly is ahead of schedule where you tore your ACL, you tore your LCL, you tore your MCL, you dislocate your kneecap, you have to undergo 4 or 5 different reconstructive surgeries. Like, the process for Tank Dell to return is going to be anywhere between 11 months to 14 months. So we may not see him play at all in 2025, which then changes to, well, does Stephon Diggs want to come back? The locker room loved him. They were very high on him when they were asked about what was going to be the process of him potentially returning. And they all said that they believe that he would be a great fit to come back in 2025. CJ Stroud has really been raving about him, said that the rapport between the two was about ready to hit their stride right before he went down with the torn ACL in week 8. He's not going to be ready for week 1 as of right now. He's probably going to miss most of, if not all, of training camp.
Okay.
but he should be ready by about week 3, week 4, if all things go according to plan. So if you're okay paying a 1-year prove-it deal for him to come back, then honestly, I think the Texans are going to be interested. Now, Nick Caserio has said there's good rapport with with his people and their people. They feel like that they could work out a deal for at least one more season, but Diggs also has to want to come back. The thing that's going to be really interesting to me, Greg, is what is his market? Because he is a 32-year-old receiver next season, coming off a major lower body injury.
Yep.
He really was the number 2 in this offense, never the number 1. But he was putting up decent numbers. When he got hurt, he had 47 catches for nearly 500 receiving yards. He had like 4 touchdowns. And that was largely due to the fact that he was taking over for Nico Collins, who was out with a hamstring injury for those 5 games. So do you feel like that he can be a stable low-end number 1, high-end number 2? And if you feel like that he can be that high-end number 2, is he going to be able to garner a multi-year contract with the team that is desperate to bring in wide receiver help, like the Dallas Cowboys? They need a secondary receiver to pair alongside with CeeDee Lamb. The New York Giants, they need a number 2 receiver, and they have money to spend alongside Malik Neighbors. If that's the case, then I think that Diggs is probably going to walk in free agency. But if there is a 1-year deal, $15 million, he knows Houston. He knows what CJ Stroud is capable of. He knows what his role is in the system. Nick Caley's offense is going to require a secondary receiver that is willing to be able to take on middle of the field type of attacks. I think it could work out. I really do. I'm not going to rule this one way or another just yet, but I do feel like that if there is a 1-year prove-it deal for wherever he lands, Miami, Baltimore, Dallas, Houston, Chicago, whatever it is, Houston feels like a good safe spot because of he can better his numbers, prove that he still is a quality number 2 wide receiver or even low-end number 1 receiver, and get paid one final time on a multi-year deal next offseason when the Texans probably add in their replacement for Tank Dell, for Stephon Diggs via the draft. It's not a foregone conclusion, I think, at this point that he is one way or another.
It's still going to be a risk either way, though. Like you said, 32, coming off a serious knee injury. And a lot of people believe, and it's justified, where you have these knee injuries and you got to wait another year before you're back to yourself. And maybe when that comes, maybe he's gone. So that's also going to be a risk for the Texans if they want to bring it back. So I guess it's all depending, too, on how much that 1-year contract is and how much Texans can afford. Because right now, I know the cap is not really ever.
It's not a real thing. So,
no.
I mean, yeah.
I get that. So, but still, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of money they throw at him if, like you said, he wants to come back. Okay, because Robert Woods, is he done?
Bearing like a vet minimum 1-year deal or like a $5 million deal, just because if they want some stability in the locker room, I would say he's probably looking elsewhere. Here was the interesting part. Everyone pegged him to be the guy that was getting cut last offseason. Like everyone thought that when it came down to roster finalization, Noah Brown's 1-year, $5 million fully guaranteed contract was good enough to keep him safe. Woods outperformed Noah Brown throughout all of training camp and then got to keep his roster spot. And it cost the Texans about $7.2 million or $7.1 million at that 2-year, $17.5 million contract. And he ended up being nothing more than a wide receiver 3. So the thing with that is that he's going to come back on a 1-year, very low minimum, low risk, low reward deal because Houston's going to go out and they're going to add in some receivers, whether it be free agency, whether it be the draft. They're going to add in somebody else. I could see that maybe happening if he really feels good in Houston. But if he believes that there still is more left in the tank and he could be a wide receiver number 3 elsewhere, I could see him going to Washington, maybe trying to cash in and be Jaden Daniels number 3 because they only have Terry McLaurin. I could see him going to the Giants trying to revitalize his career. I could see him going to maybe Cincinnati if they let go of T. Higgins. So there's going to be, I think, a market for Robert Woods. He's not ready to be done playing.
Okay.
But I just feel like with Houston, it's got to be the league minimum for him to want to come back. Or at least for Houston to make a deal for him.
Yeah. Bunwale, is there a need to bring him back? Do they value him, special teamer, depth piece?
Yeah, Agumbawale is probably one of the, I would say, top 5. Let's make sure that we offer him a deal. Doesn't mean he will come back, but Frank Ross loves him on special teams. He is a hard worker. He's been the pass catching back as well. Like when they lost Joe Mixon at week 2 in the Chicago Bears game for those 3 weeks, Houston was running like a 3 running back tandem where Cam Akers and Dameon Pierce were seeing a majority of the carries. But on third down passing attacks, Wale came on in. And he was the single big reason why they won in week 4 against Jacksonville with a 1-yard touchdown catch. Its time expired. So he adds value to the team as a number 3 running back. They did sign Jawar Jordan to a reserve future deal, 6th-round pick out of Louisville.
Yeah.
He offers very similar skill sets to what Wale is. But I feel like that if you could offer him like a 1-year, 2.5, 1-year, $2 million deal, there's a reason to at least have a conversation that he should be back in the building. They really do value what he provides on special teams, on what he provides as that pass catching back.
Okay.
I don't think that he is off the table, to say the least.
Is he the gunner?
He plays everywhere. Like, so he's done, he's done the gunner before. Chris Boyd's been more so the gunner in recent years. He's been the pass protector on punts. He's lined up on inside. He's done some punt returning. He's just been like a Swiss Army knife on special teams for this.
Okay. Because I'm on a mission to find out who the all 32 NFL team gunners are. For some reason, I can't find it. So that's good. Okay, so Chris Boyd is considered, and he's free agent. So do you think he comes back because of that? Is he good enough in that role?
He's a special team ace. The problem is that he has frustrated the fan base by putting.
Oh, that's right.
Wounds.
Yeah.
So everyone wants to point back to the divisional round matchup against Kansas City, and then for good reason, because of the moment that happened between him and Frank Ross on the sidelines was drastically overblown by social media. They had conversations later on, and they felt really, really good. But what happened is that they went back, and that that fumble recovery, you see 9 other players all searching towards the ball, and you're throwing your helmet, excited that you forced a play. That's not how a play works. It's selfish. It's not a way that DeMeco Ryans wants his locker room to act. He called out Chris Boyd after the game saying that we cannot have self-inflicting wounds like that. And your entire job and the entire premise of anybody who is trying to make the Texans roster is you have to swarm to the football. You have to finish the play. You have to be the reason why every single play happens is ending with the ball in our hands because we fight to the last whistle.
Yep.
And the fact that you threw your helmet off and you already had multiple penalties before earlier in the season, and you had been kind of dealing with a lot of what's the best way to put this? He had been dealing with a lot of locker room tensions. Oh. I don't see a scenario where he is back unless it's literally a vet minimum, or if they feel like that he is just too valuable to let go in free agency as a gunner.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because it's not just the throwing of the helmet, sort of like what you were saying. It's the ball was still in play.
Yeah,
and I've seen this. And look, it's not just him. I've seen it's like it goes on a lot in the league now. Somebody makes a big play, and all they want to do is look at me, and the ball is like in play. What do you stop with that?
Well, Greg, how many times are we watching as players now are getting right to the end zone and then they drop it? It's a touchback. It's little things like that drive me crazy. Just get to the end zone, then throw it 50 yards into the stand.
Yeah, that too.
Nobody's going to care. But when you're not an elite player or you're not a necessity player for a team like Houston, every minor little thing is going to be under the microscope. And plays like that drive coaches like DeMeco Ryans insane because it's the 15 yards after while you make the big play and the play is still going on. You're selfishly putting yourself ahead of everybody else on the team. It drives coaches like DeMeco Ryans nuts. So,
and you don't want that. And you don't want that in the locker room if you can avoid it. So, okay, makes a lot of sense. Let's go to defense. And I guess Fatukasi, man, I don't know what happened to him after we left the Jets because he was maybe it was money. As soon as he got the paycheck, he's never been the same player. I'm assuming he's gone, right?
There's going to be a conversation, I think, between him and Mario Edwards. If you were to put a gun in my head right now, I think one is back, one is on the market.
Okay.
But I think that Edwards was a guy that offered incredible value as a pass rusher early on in the season. He did a good job of replacing the role of Danico Autry, who is another name that may be a cap casualty cut later on. But then he gets suspended for those 4 games because of the PED, the testing. And then he didn't return to that same value. So does that hurt his market compared to when at the initial part he was one of the better interior defensive linemen? Does Foley Fotokoski's role as a run stopper help Houston a lot out too? But I believe one's going to be back, one's going to be on the open market.
Okay. And then moving down here, we can see most of the guys are role players. In the secondary, Eric Murray seems to stand out. He appeared to have a good season.
Yeah, he was a starter. He did a pretty decent job. He was very hit and miss. Like the good on him was very, very good. He made a couple of big time stops on third down. He broke up a few passes. He also allowed 6 explosive plays this past year and was getting burnt left and right. Poor angles in pursuit to the football. The Tennessee Titans game is one that stands out where Will Levis looked like a first round pick because if he was just connecting with Calvin really, and it was bad angles and bad pursuits by 23. I think that he has now kind of played himself out of a role in Houston because he's shown that he can be a full-time starter. He's shown that he can be a guy that if on the open market, give him a multi-year deal, he'll get you 85 to 90 tackles. He'll get an interception or two. He'll break up 8 or 9 passes. He'll play the run. He'll be effective as a third safety. And Houston may not want to pay that price when they already have Kalen Bullock signed onto a 3-year deal, and they already have Jimmy Ward back for 2025. So if Ward is back and they don't cut him, which I don't think that they will, I feel like that Eric Murray is probably going to hit the open market because if they have to look at everybody else. Like MJ Stewart offers incredible value on special teams. That's somebody that I don't think they want to let go of. Miles Bryant did a really good job coming on later in the year, filling in as that nickel defender on dime formations when they went to 6 defensive backs. He had some value on special teams. I feel like that they're going to look at that and say, well, we can bring in another dude that is on a 1-year contract that is looking to re-spark his career in free agency, or we can go ahead and we can draft a guy and we can go build him for the future to be the replacement for Jimmy Ward. But Eric Murray, he was a guy that was brought in by the previous regime underneath Bill O'Brien when he was the GM and the head coach. The way the contract worked out, they couldn't cut him because it would have been so much dead cap space. He played himself into a restructured 1-year deal last offseason. I think that was the end of the deal.
Okay. And by the way, if he's inconsistent, like you're saying, and I obviously agree with you because the stats are good, but there's a lot of bad from what you said. To me, that sounds like he's probably better off as a role player.
Yeah, he is.
A starter. Yeah.
The one guy that I really think that they're going to have a hard time keeping, but they should do everything possible to keep is Derek Barnett. Like Barnett, when they got him off waivers from Philadelphia, they thought that he was just going to be rotational guy, maybe a number 4 that comes on in on third down, can shift inside. He has been more than as advertised since joining this team. Like they signed him to a 1-year deal this offseason thinking he was a good number 3. And multiple times when Will Anderson was out, when Danielle Hunter was dealing with some injuries, when the Danico Autry thing was going on, he stepped up and was phenomenal as a pass rusher and as a run defender. Big time play, got the Fat Man touchdown against the Dallas Cowboys, which always is a win. He had another big time play against the Tennessee Titans in week 17, another big time scoring. He offers so much flexibility to be that interior pass rusher, that exterior number 5 role. He can be a number 3. He can be a low end number 2. I think that he's going to get a multi-year deal. Okay. Houston should do everything possible to bring him back. Like, honestly, he's not worth the franchise tag, but if there was a player that I just feel like you got a franchise tag, it would be him because of just how much position flexibility and how stable he's been the last few years. But that also is probably going to lead to him getting a major deal elsewhere this offseason and probably leaving Houston. They're going to now need to fill that role with that number 3.
Yeah. When a player like that comes into the league, top pick and doesn't perform as well as a lot of fans would have hoped with that organization, and he leaves, goes to another organization, and it hits, and he's having the best 2 years of his career, or year and a half, you would think that he'd want to stay. But sometimes it doesn't work out.
Money talks, dude. We all know that, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. So then as far as everybody else, most of everyone else, no big deal if they were to leave, right? Is there anyone else that they would want to keep? Any special teamers? I mean, Phillips.
I would say Jake Hansen is probably the one, and he's a restricted free agent. So, they could match any tender deal and then go ahead and try and get some recompensation for him. I think that just because of what he offers on kickoff and kickoff returns, that's something that you're going to have to monitor. Kadar Holman's really interesting because they really liked him, but they cut him, then they brought him back, and then he tore his ACL, so he's going to be coming off a major injury. Jeff Okudah, I think, is going to be gone. Really, really, really underwhelming year when they thought, hey, revitalization, former first-round pick, come to Houston. Like, he was supposed to be the outside cornerback during the year. And then here comes Kamari Laster that was expected to play the nickel. And within 2 days of rookie minicamp, he takes over for Jeff Okudah. Like, they say, hey, Okudah, you're now the number 3. We're moving Jalen Petrie down to the nickel, which always should have been the move from the get-go for Houston because he just thrived at that spot at Baylor. And then he had no role. And then he was injured all the time. And then he was on the IR, and then he comes back. And then the 2 times that he plays, he gets burnt. So, Okudah's probably going to be a free agent. I think that probably Hanson's one. Hewitt is probably the name that everybody wants to come back just because if he's been a stable number 4 linebacker and he's been basically a special teams captain. Yeah. But again, one of those things when you play really well on special teams and then you show your capabilities with the pick 6 against the Green Bay Packers in week 7, filling in for Azeez Al-Shaair, somebody's going to say that they really like you and you're going to get paid. And if you're not getting met, if the numbers aren't matching, you're probably walking. So I could see him. I could see him coming back on a 1-year deal. I could see him getting a 2-year deal elsewhere just to have some position flexibility and stability in his contract.
Okay. And then before we go to a couple other things, you mentioned Autry. So if you're looking at a potential cap casualties, you're thinking Autry is like the main guy that might get the cut?
Number 1 for me is Shaq Mason. He really struggled this past year on the offensive line. He dealt with some injuries. He took a major step back. Everyone has been talking about him. If they were to release him, I believe they would save roughly around $9.4 million in cap hit, but the money wouldn't come through until post June 1st. So they would get money back and they'd only have $5.1 million in dead cap money. But that $9.4 million would offer nothing to free agency right now. Yeah, what that would do is that $9.4 million would come to helping Houston extend Derek Stingley Jr. before the start of training camp, because that is a priority that they have this offseason. They want to lock him up. They know he is going to command top dollar. They want to make sure that he gets the deal before Sauce Gardner does because of this as well as I do, Greg. The new norm is the next payment. So whatever the first guy is getting, you're getting the next one. So you want to be setting the tone for the offseason when it comes to extending a player like Derek Stingley Jr. rather than meeting the terms of what Sauce Gardner's getting paid. Because eventually you're going to be outpaid and somebody's going to be willing to offer that type of contract, and then you're going to have to listen to potentially trading him. So it's I think that they're going to cut Shaq Mason. I do. I think it will be a post-June 1st one. If they cut Denico Autry, they're going to get about $8.9 million back in cap space. The problem is, again, it's post-June 1st one. So that money would go towards the Derek Stingley deal, but now you're hurting your defensive line. Because if you're letting Kurt Hinish walk, you're going to let go of Jerry Hughes. You're potentially losing Derek Barnett. You're probably not keeping Foley Fotokoski and Mario Edwards. Tim Sell's going to get a brand new restructured contract deal. So now you're putting such an emphasis on building your defensive line in the NFL draft or through free agency. And what are you really willing to pay when you hear the way that the team talked about Denico Autry when he signed last year? Junkyard dog, alpha mentality, ferocious position flexibility. I don't see the money that will be deteriorated in dead cap space going towards the defensive line. I can see it at wide receiver. I can see it at running back. I can see it at tight end a little bit. I can see it at other positions. But defensive line is one of those ones where at worst case, he's a really solid depth piece. In best case, he is a third down option that we're going to use as a pass rusher.
He's also going to be 35.
Yeah.
So he's getting up there, and he did miss time. What did he have, an injury this past year?
Suspended for 6 games to begin the year.
Suspension. Okay. Yeah. That was the suspension. Okay. Let's, by the way, were there any coaching changes of note?
Kaylee, the offense coordinator.
Yeah. So what happened there?
A lot of things. Without giving away too much information to where I will get in trouble with PR.
Okay.
Differing opinions in the locker room of Bobby Slowick. Inconsistency when it came to the play calling. There was a point in the year where Houston didn't score in the second half for over a month. Like literally, they did
Yeah, I
not score
remember
a
that.
single
Yes.
point in the second half.
Yeah.
So that was really, really downtrodden. So much of the inability to protect CJ Stroud. He was sacked 52 times. The Texans gave up 54 sacks, which was the second most, only behind the Chicago Bears. And what's interesting with that one, Greg, they were also the most expensive offensive line in the NFL this past year. They had the most money invested with Titus Howard, with Shaq Mason, with Laremy Tunsil. And then you throw in the other guys like Kenyon Green, who was a first-round pick. That was a total bust. Like, they invested the most in the offensive line, and they gave up 54 sacks. So there was so much concern just at that standpoint alone that Bobby Slowick eventually was shown the door. They bring in Nick Caley. He comes from the Dante Scarnecchia tree of the offensive line coaching. He has a good relationship with Cole Popovich, who they promoted in favor of Chris Strausser to the offensive line coach. So there's going to be more of an emphasis on blocking, on tight end usage, on how they're going to run the football efficiently up the middle. They're going to need that north to south runner, which I think a guy like Joe Mixon plays extremely well. I think that Dameon Pierce could have a better season because of the style of offense that they're going to run. There's a lot to like about Caley. The one thing that people are a little cautious of is he's going to be a first-time play caller.
Yeah.
And they just went through having a first-time play caller. And the offense went from 13th in scoring to 21st in scoring, 11th in passing to 22nd in passing. CJ Stroud regressed immensely from year 1 to year 2. And this is a very pivotal year for the Texans organization because of they're going to have to start figuring out what is our plan moving forward with this offense with CJ. How much are we willing to pay for him? Do we believe that he has hit his ceiling, that he had a one-year wonder? Is he going to continue to regress? What do we feel like about our organization moving forward with this type of quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is nowadays, and I think we're seeing it obviously not just with the quarterbacks when we knew it was coming, when all those awesome Hall of Famers were retiring and we're going to go through a really rough patch for a while, but now we're starting to see the young quarterbacks like Stroud and so forth, but also with the coaches. I mean, it's not easy finding good veteran, experienced, quality play callers. And for the most part, I know you say the right things. Yeah, we want someone. The next guy we want him to have experience. But then you go out in the market and you look, and there's not that many of those guys that are either available or are really all that good based on what their experience proved the first time around. That you are better off just taking a chance with someone else that looks like maybe they have the ability to take that next step.
But like everybody wanted Chip Kelly down here. Like if you talk to any Texans fan, they were just all in on Chip Kelly, the relationship with D'Amico Ryans praised his name when he got hired here. Because remember, he was in Philadelphia during his last 3 years during Kelly's reign when he was the Eagles coach. So he learned how to become a coach really from Chip Kelly. Wow, and so they thought, okay, well, Chip Kelly just took a job to work with the former protege and Ryan Day. He had been rumored to want to go back to the NFL. And I had heard last year that he really wanted to go back to the NFL. He wanted to only call plays. They had a meeting with him. According to what I was told, the meeting went well. Eventually, they kind of figured out that they weren't going to be able to pay the price because of Las Vegas, a team that I figured was going to be interested in him because they were interested in him last year, gave him a $6 million salary. And that is the most expensive salary for an NFL coordinator in NFL history. Greg, let me just throw this out here for you. There are 5 coaches that last year went to the college football playoff, led their teams to the first 12-team playoff that will make less money next season than Chip Kelly as an offense coordinator in the NFL. Like, wow. So they were outbid by him. And so then they turned to Caley. Caley was always the guy who they thought was the best fit organizationally for the offense. And there's a lot to like about Caley. He comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree, but he also has a good relationship with offensive line play. And the offensive line play, I think, is a big selling point, blocking the way they want to utilize the wide receivers. You have to be a physical meat and potatoes son of a bitch type of player if you want to work in the system. Okay. So there's a lot to, I think, kind of pinpoint what is going to be the Texans' offseason plans because of what Caley provides and what he wants in the offseason.
So can you, because what do we have, 10 or 20 minutes?
We got about 20 more minutes.
Okay. So what is the biggest changes you are going to see? I know a lot of fans out there might want to know, well, how can I connect certain dots to certain free agents or draft picks to this offense, and what kind of offensive system is going to be different from last year? So what specifically are going to be the biggest changes?
They're going to be more physical when it comes to, I think, the pass protection. That means that tight ends are going to have to block. If you do not block, you will not survive in this roster. Wide receivers are going to have to block. Downfield, you are going to have to be 8 or 9 yards, finishing until the whistle. And you look at guys that were in Los Angeles this last year. Cooper Kupp, willing blocker. Puka Nacua, very willing blocker. Even guys like Tutu Atwell, who are a little bit smaller, they gave their bodies and threw them on the line. That way they were able to create opportunities for Kyron Williams out of the backfield. I think you're going to see more north to south running. So not a lot of options to the outside. You're going to see a lot of just straight up the middle. Let's go ahead and pile drive forward. Let's close the gap, create little holes through the A and the B hole. That way we create opportunities for our running backs to get 4 or 5 yards. I think timely throws. You're going to see, I think, C.J. Stroud have a quicker release. I think that you're going to see him be a little bit more direct on where his target is going. I think that you're going to see him be more mobile. I think that the big thing that people are starting to figure out with C.J. is he is a lot more athletic than we give him credit for. I'm not saying that he is a dual threat quarterback, to say the least, because if he's nowhere near that.
Yeah.
But there are opportunities where he would stay behind the line of scrimmage waiting for a receiver just to get open. Yeah. Where I think now you're going to see him take that next step forward. Nope, I'm going to tuck and run. I'm going to gain 7 yards. I'm going to slide. Okay. I'm done with the play. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. The blocking is going to be really critical. They're going to run a lot of 12 personnel. They're going to run some 21 personnel, some 22 personnel. They're going to, I think, utilize the fullback position in some capacity. So I wouldn't be shocked if they have that like H-back role somewhere on the roster.
Okay.
They're going to, I think, be a run-oriented team on most days with a pass efficiency on days where they have to go against one of the better run defenses. Something that Kaylee talked extensively about when he was hired was he wasn't going to pigeonhole the offense into being one direct type of unit. If there are days where they go up against a stout run defense, they're going to go pass happy. On days where they go up against an elite coverage, they're going to force the team to make them throw. They're going to work that defensive line to its core and make them have to throw through the air. And I think that's going to be really poignant because there are going to be games where Stroud is going to throw, I think, 20 to 25 times. There are going to be times where he throws 41 times. Okay. And I think that will be a good balance to figure out what you need to continue to build upon. What works at tight end? What works in the Z position? What works as the flanker? Okay. Do you feel good about the slot wide receiver spot? Because until I think they finalize that roster, everything right now is up for debate on what they can be going into 2025.
Would someone like Demarcus Robinson or any other potential free agents out there from the Rams make sense?
Robinson, I think, makes sense. The name that honestly I feel like just fits what Kaylee wants in free agency is Matt Collins of the Buffalo Bills. Just that special teamer that is willing to be an open downfield blocker. He's not going to be that valuable when it comes to his receiving threat, but when he does make a couple of big-time plays, he will. But it's all about that blocking, where you can line him up as that X receiver. If you want to throw him inside of certain plays, he can be like that extra tight end that kind of closes off the gap with the safety, creates that running crease for Joe Mixon, offers value on special teams. If I were the Texans right now, Matt Collins would be one of the very few names that I think is at the forefront of let's offer him a 1-year contract.
Okay, awesome. Let's dive into the top needs then. I don't know if you've already done this yourself yet.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a top 5. You want to start with number 1?
Yeah, it's interior offensive line. Okay. You cannot next year trot out Shaq Mason, Jared Patterson / Juice Scruggs, and Juice Scruggs / Kenyon Green.
Who's got the best between Patterson and Scruggs? Who's got the brighter future?
If it's at center, I think it's Patterson. If it's at guard, I think it's Scruggs.
Okay.
But honestly, just overall, I think it's Patterson.
Oh, okay.
Patterson's been really consistent when it comes to run blocking. I think he has shown more improvements than Scruggs when it comes to pass protection. I think he has done a really good job of kind of stabilizing that center position. So much so they moved Juice Scruggs back to guard because of just how well Patterson was playing. But no matter what, you can't have Shaq Mason out there next year. I thought that he was a liability in run blocking. I thought he was a liability in pass pro. There's a reason why he has been rumored to be the number 1 cut option for Houston. And then Kenyon Green has been a bust. Kenyon Green, number 1, cannot stay healthy. That is the biggest thing. He has gotten hurt every single year, and he's been on the IR. Number 2, he has dealt with inconsistencies as a pass protector, and he has regressed as a pass protector. As a run blocker, he's been fine. Honestly, if I were to get Kenyon Green as a run blocker and Juice Scruggs as a pass protector, I probably would be able to make it work for one more year. I could. But the fact that I have so many question marks when it comes to his angles, his pursuits, his leverage, his body control, where his pad level is when he gets in pass protection. And he lost a lot of weight. So one of the big things that we said going into last offseason was he's a little bit out of shape. Well, he spent the entire year when he was on the IR getting in shape. He gained like 15 pounds of muscle. He lost like 20 pounds of fat. He looked like a more stable option at guard. And he still had the same faults. His footwork was off pace. His pad level was off. His hand usage was off. He was losing blocks. He was getting called for false starts all the time. He was getting holding calls against him. It needs to be done. The Texans, they may want to keep him just because of what the value of an offensive lineman is going to be worth on the trade market. But as a starter, you've got to get an interior offensive lineman, whether it be through the draft or through the free agency. I personally think, Greg, they got to add two. One through the draft, one through free agency.
Okay. And let's go to your second need or third,
wide receiver.
Because that's 1A, 1B. Wide receiver. Okay.
Wide receiver. I personally think that John Mechie is a good wide receiver 5, but that's all. I can expect. Yeah, wow. But that's all I can expect from him at this point.
Okay.
He gets me 30 catches a season for 225 yards and maybe a touchdown. I think Xavier Hutchinson at this point has been so inconsistent. And I loved his tape coming out of Iowa State.
Yep.
I think at this point, last year he was playing for a roster spot. It may be time to see what you can get for him in return, if possible. Give him a fresh start elsewhere. If not, he's a wide receiver 5 as well. That is his ceiling. Is a wide receiver 5. You have Nico Collins, and that's it. No Tank Dell. Act like Tank Dell is not playing this year. You get Robert Woods and Stephon Diggs in the free agent market. You got to add in somebody. I much like I said with the interior offensive line, they got to draft a wide receiver. They got to sign a free agent wide receiver, and not a guy like a Mac Hollins. Hollins is your special teams dude that offers value in run blocking. You need an actual wide receiver who can make plays in the open field.
All right. Okay. Need number 3.
Defensive tackle. Just because I think you need some stability there. What's so interesting about the way that the Texans have utilized the defensive tackle position is they sign these guys for 1-year contracts. They hit, and then they try to replace them. There's a certain brand of style that D'Amico Ryans likes at defensive tackle, which is kind of a little undersized, but good at rushing the passer, adding that volume when it comes to quarterback hits, tackles for losses, quarterback pressures. Sheldon Rankins did that really well last year, which is why he got paid by the Cincinnati Bengals. Foley Fotokoski did that pretty well. Mario Edwards, who started off his career as a defensive end, then shifted inside the defensive tackle. He plays that role really well. I feel like that they got to get somebody who can be signed to a contract. Like when I look at defensive tackle, yeah, you can maybe go re-sign Sheldon Rankins on a 1-year deal. It'd be great for the defensive line depth. But like I look at round 2, round 3, a Deion Walker, a Darius Alexander.
Well, that's one big dude though.
But the way he plays run support and the way that he is a bull rusher, like just things like that, you could find value in. Because if they were going to go get Jordan Davis a few years ago, or they were looking at Tavondre Sweat from Texas, Deion Walker like kind of fits that same mold 2-down type of dude. But like a Darius Alexander from Toledo, really good Senior Bowl week.
Yep.
I think he can kill it at the combine. That's somebody who, when you look at kind of like the tea leaves, they just brought in the defensive line coach, Frank Okam, from Toledo to now be the assistant defensive line coach. If things just go according to plan, I think that he could be a really good 3-tech that offers that undersized, good pass rushing technique that adds value and run support.
You know who also might be good is Aeneas Peebles.
Yeah, I think that he would make a lot of sense for the style of defense they want to run.
Yep. Okay. 4.
Probably safety, just because of Jimmy Ward's going into a contract year and he can't stay healthy. I don't think that you want to pay Eric Murray a lot of money. So get somebody that you can trust to bring alongside Kalen Balak, somebody you can trust alongside Jalen Petrie, who also is going into a contract year. Petrie's probably going to play the nickel. So you need that guy that can be an opposite of what Balak does really well, which is play not the center fielder role, but like the intermediate part of the defensive secondary, and a guy that's willing to play and run support. Balak did a really good job last year, I think, improving as a tackler. But I think that you need to get that one guy that can come on in on a 2-year deal, or draft a guy in round 4 that can maybe be a long-term solution.
I didn't realize that's how you pronounce his name. It's
Bullock. Yeah.
Bullock.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Interesting.
trust me, we got a lot of trouble after a while because we kept calling him Bullock, and they were like, "Nope."
Well, everybody would call him Bullock. I mean, come
It's
on.
spelled Bullock, so it's like you gotta call him Bullock. But yeah, it's
Okay.
Kalen Bullock is how you say it.
All right, and then the fifth of the five.
Can I go like a tie like here?
Sure.
I think it's linebacker and I think it's tight end. Like Dalton Schultz did not live up to his 3-year extension last year. He was abysmal as a run blocker. He offers nothing in run support at this point. He's a receiving threat.
Yep.
But I do feel like that you're not going to cut him because of what the dead cap if it was going to be against you versus what the money you'll get back for 2025.
Okay.
Like I could see them cutting him in 2026, but next year I think he's on the roster. Brevin Jordan's coming off a torn ACL. I don't know what to expect from him. He's gotten better as a blocker, but how much better is the big question. Cade Stover, he's coming off of an injury to where he had a broken collarbone. So what's he going to look like? I have the highest hopes for him because of his relationship with CJ Stroud and like the way they like to utilize the tight end position in the Kaylee's system. And then linebacker, Henry To'oTo'o. He's kind of been a hit and miss at times. He's gotten better as a tackler. He has, but I still view him as a linebacker number 3, not as a linebacker number 2.
Okay.
You're going to restructure Azeez Al-Shaair's contract, but that maybe means that he'll be a free agent after 2026. And then Christian Harris, he was dealing with an injury all year. And when he was on the field, it was very sporadic. So that linebacker spot, knowing that you're probably potentially losing guys like Devin White, you're losing Neville Hewitt, Jake Hanson's going to potentially hit free agency, Delshon Phillips is going to hit free agency. Simply for the depth purposes, you got to add in somebody. But I also want somebody that you can say is going to push guys like Al-Shaair, like Christian Harris, like To'oTo'o for first-team reps, because of they all had their hits and misses last season. I think that the linebacker position is huge for D'Amico Ryan's defense.
Okay. And by the way, do they also need to add because you were talking about receivers, so do you think they need to add someone that could also either double as a kick returner? Or, I mean, they can find it anywhere. They can find out a corner or running back. But do you think they need to zero in on a full-time number 1 kick returner, punt returner?
That's the thing, is that they think that they had that in Tank Dell and he got hurt. So probably, I think you're going to have to look at certain receivers that fit that mold that really are probably best used as a return guy. Like I could see a Silas Bolden from Texas as a 7th round pick just getting picked up because of what he offers as a return man, like on punt returns and kick returns. Then he ends up being a wide receiver. Like Steven Sims is a good comp for him where you don't really want him on the field as a receiver, but if you got to throw him on the field as a receiver, it could be worse. He's here for special teams. Okay.
Before I let you go, developing players, give me a couple of guys or anybody on the team that might be, if you're not a Houston fan, you're not really sure about, a lot of these, the back of the depth chart players that might be able to break through next year, either from the rookie class or second-year class.
So Blake Fisher at right tackle is probably going to get the first team reps going into training camp. That doesn't mean that Houston won't be proactive on bringing in another competition, whether that be the draft or free agency.
And you don't think that's a need?
I think interior offensive line is so much more of a need than exterior offensive line.
So you think Fisher, you think they believe in Fisher, that Fisher can take that next step?
When you use a 2nd round pick on an offensive line that had over 25 starts at Notre Dame, you got to believe that there's at least another year before you go ahead and punt on him. So that's my theory is you feel good about Titus Howard. If you shipped him inside a guard, he plays the right guard position for a year. You go draft a dude like Tyler Booker out of Alabama. Blake Fisher plays right tackle. If he struggles, here's the best part. You add in a free agent. He can now play right guard. Blake Fisher, you send him to the bench. You put Tyus Howard back at right tackle. It ends up working out. Yeah. But I think that Fisher's going to get a chance to really stand out with first-team reps next season. Brevin Jordan, I think, is going to be really well utilized because of just the tight end play and how they like to utilize tight ends with the Kaylee's system. He did a good job of improving on all 3 stages of what you want a tight end. Blocking, pass protection, and then as a receiving threat. And he offers value on special teams. He's been able to play also that H-back role, which, again, if that can solve a problem where you don't need to utilize the fullback by signing somebody in free agency, that's a need that comes on in. He can be out of the red zone. He can be a name that comes out of the backfield as that 3rd down pass catching player. Honestly, that's probably it for right now.
Okay.
Tommy Togiai, he's going to be back on the team as a rotational defensive lineman, but he plays maybe like 15 snaps a game. They're really important 15 snaps, but he's a depth piece. I don't think that you're going to see much from Solomon Byrd. I think Dylan Horton, maybe, if they feel like that he could take that next step forward. Remember, he was dealing with the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, so he was put on the NFI list at the start of the year. He came back in mid-October. Maybe he's the replacement that they like internally for Derek Barnett. But again, like that's a guy that you think is defensive end number 4, really good if we need like a 4th down stop and we're bull rushing the interior. Like that's his role at this point. But for the most part, I feel like that they're going to have to add in free agency. I think the draft is really where they're going to have to target a lot of names. And right now they only have 6 picks. So there's 2 ways that they can go about it. Number 1 is they can trade back, hope that a guy that they fall in love with at 25 is available, say at like 37, and they get a 3rd round pick in return. Or they're just going to have to, I think, make some moves with that pick 58 and that pick 86 to where they're getting guys on day 3, but they're recouping a lot of players that they believe have incredible upside.
Yeah, I didn't even get a chance to talk about that, but that is very interesting. Again, the cap, it's not like they got a lot of money to spend and only 6 picks. So, I can see the situation there. It sounds like Derek Barnett, though, is probably the biggest decision or hope that they can add him back to the roster somehow, even more so than Stephon Diggs, for sure. It seems like that's what we're coming out of this conversation. He's the big story this offseason.
If they could find, let's just say this. If they could find a way to replace Stephon Diggs with a good veteran, I don't know, maybe it's like Darius Slayton as the Z receiver, and then they bring in Jack Beck from TCU, or they go get like a Trey Harris from Ole Miss, and they end up having the same amount of production, they may be content with that. I don't know if you're going to find a good enough number 3 defensive end that can shift inside and be a bull rusher as a 4-eye technique the way that Barnett did. Yeah. And Barnett also fits what DeMeco Ryans wants defensively. When you have that fit, that becomes a priority. And if you're a defensive-minded coach, like as much as we want to say that offense wins games, defense championships, like you're a defensive coach. The defense is priority to you. It always will be. It's why you went out and you signed Azeez Al-Shaair because he fit your defense. It's why you signed Daniil Hunter because he fit your defense. Like they went after guys last offseason that were defensive first basis because of it's a defensive-led team. And your defense was top 15 last year in almost every category. Why would you ruin that by bringing in other dudes that maybe don't fit the same criteria?
Yeah, especially because that line, even with Barnett, looks like, especially inside. And hey, as you know, I'm sure, excellent draft class of defensive tackles. Yeah. This is going to be a huge bonanza for if you need defensive tackles, which Houston does, they're going to be able to get them. Just depends on where. So, Cole, I appreciate it. I know you're going to run unless something really big happens. We probably won't talk until after the draft, but that should be a really fun conversation because that's pretty much almost the end of the offseason, as strange as that sounds. But we're kind of getting there. And then I got links in the description, of course. You can check out everything there regarding how to find, locate everything that Cole's doing in social media, his own shows, his own articles, things of that nature. Cole, I appreciate your time as always.
Anytime, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.